The day I finally retired after 42 years as a nurse, I gave my daughter the most meaningful gift I had ever made. Inside that handmade memory box, I put photos, letters, and pieces of a lifetime spent loving her. She opened it before our family, glanced inside, and just rolled her eyes. Then she laughed softly and said, "Mom, this is just a box of old stuff." Everyone went silent. I smiled so nobody would see my heart breaking. But in that moment, I realized something devastating. My daughter did not value what I had spent my entire life giving her. And just a few days later, I quietly returned the favor with my will. Before we go on, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever given someone your whole heart only to realize they never appreciated it? Tell me in the comments. If these stories about deep family lessons and unexpected twists speak to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps more than you know. Also, let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. I always love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with people around the world. My name is Monica Dunn, and for most of my life, I believed love was measured by sacrifice, not flowers, not grand speeches, not expensive gifts, just sacrifice. The kind that quietly steals pieces of your own life so someone else can have a better one. I was 25 when my husband Michael died in a highway crash outside Columbus, Ohio. One moment, I was a young wife planning a family vacation. The next, I was a widow standing beside a hospital bed, trying to understand how a healthy man could disappear from my future in a single afternoon. Our daughter, Lauren, was only 8 years old. I remember looking at her sleeping face that night and making a promise. No matter how hard life got, she would never feel abandoned. I would carry the weight for both of us. Back then, I truly believed love could fix everything. I did not know that sometimes love, when given without limits, can create its own kind of blindness. The years after Michael's death were a blur of exhaustion. I worked as a nurse at Riverside Methodist Hospital. My shifts were long, and my paycheck was never enough. Some weeks I worked 6 days, and on others I accepted every overtime opportunity available. I spent countless nights walking hospital corridors while other mothers were reading bedtime stories. I missed school concerts. I missed soccer games. I missed birthday parties. Every missed moment left a deep scar on my heart. But I told myself it was temporary. I was building a future for Lauren. Whenever guilt threatened to crush me, I would look at her, sleeping peacefully in her room, and remind myself why I was doing it. She never complained, at least not when she was little. Lauren was a bright child, smart, funny, and beautiful. The kind of girl who could make strangers smile without even trying. Teachers loved her, neighbors adored her, and I cherished her more than anyone. Every single decision I made revolved around her future. When friends urged me to start dating again, I refused. When my mother suggested I deserved another chance at happiness, I refused. When coworkers invited me on trips or social outings, I usually refused. My life became simple. Work, home, Lauren, repeat. Years went by. Lauren grew into a remarkable young woman, excelling in school and earning admission to Ohio State University. I still remember standing in her empty bedroom after helping her move into her dorm. I sat on her bed and cried, not because I was sad, but because I was so proud. Everything I had sacrificed suddenly felt worth it. I thought the hardest years were behind us, but I was wrong. College was much more expensive than I had anticipated. I took extra shifts, sold jewelry Michael had given me, and drained most of my savings. There were months when I barely bought a single thing for myself. My shoes wore out, my car needed repairs, and my refrigerator was nearly empty. But Lauren never knew. And honestly, I did not want her to know. A parent is not supposed to hand their burdens to their child. At least, that is what I believed. When Lauren graduated, I was sitting in the front row. I cried through most of the ceremony. The woman next to me probably thought I was losing my mind, but that diploma represented thousands of sacrifices nobody else had ever seen. After graduation, Lauren found a marketing job in Cincinnati, and her career took off quickly. Within a few years, she was earning more than I ever had. I was incredibly proud of that, too. She deserved success. When she married Ethan Mitchell, I welcomed him into the family immediately. He was kind, respectful, steady, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I liked him from the start. And when their son Noah was born, my heart expanded all over again. Being a grandmother felt like getting a second chance at joy. I babysat whenever they needed help. I drove Noah to school, went to his baseball games, and picked him up when Lauren was too busy. Sometimes I wondered if I was becoming too available, too eager, too willing. But I never questioned it. Family helps family. That was how I was raised. Then little changes started appearing, small enough to ignore at first. Lauren became harder to reach, and our phone calls were shorter. Visits became less frequent. Conversations felt rushed. When I talked about my life, she seemed distracted. But when she talked about hers, she expected my complete attention. At first, I blamed adulthood. People get busy. Careers become demanding, and families grow complicated. I understood that. I had lived it myself. But over time, something deeper began bothering me. It was not just that Lauren had less time for me. It felt like she had less interest. There is a massive difference. One afternoon, I spent nearly an hour telling her about a difficult patient I had cared for. When I finished, she looked up from her phone and said, "Sorry, Mom, what were you saying?" It sounds like a small thing. Maybe it was. But moments like that happened more and more. Another time, I invited her over for dinner. She canceled 30 minutes before arriving. But then I saw photos online of her having drinks with friends that same evening. Again, I told myself not to overreact. Again, I made excuses for her. Again, I chose understanding. That is just what mothers do. Then came my 67th birthday. Lauren forgot. Not completely, but she only remembered 3 days later. She called me from the road, sighing, "Oh my God, Mom, I am so sorry. Things have just been crazy." I laughed it off, telling her it was fine. But after we hung up, I sat alone in the quiet kitchen, staring at the birthday cake Patricia Collins brought over. One forgotten birthday shouldn't matter, yet somehow it did. It was never about the actual date, but about feeling invisible. That ache stayed with me. Not every single day, but often enough that I couldn't ignore it. As my retirement got closer, I kept hoping it would finally bring Lauren and me back together. I pictured cozy family dinners, weekend visits, and long talks. I imagined finally having time for the people I had spent decades working to support, especially my daughter. I had no clue that retirement would expose truths I had spent years avoiding. I definitely didn't know the person who would break my heart wasn't some stranger. It wasn't a dishonest patient or a difficult coworker. It wasn't even life itself. It was the little girl I had spent 42 years loving more than my own life. And worst of all, back then, I still believed she loved me just as much. With retirement looming, I found myself thinking less about the future and more about the past. Maybe that's just what happens at the end of a long career. You stop measuring life by what you are building and start measuring it by what you have built. For me, that meant 42 years as a nurse and a mother. Both roles shaped me, exhausted me, and gave my life its true meaning. A month before my retirement party, Patricia Collins sat at my kitchen table, sipping her coffee. Patricia had been my dearest friend for over 30 years. She stood by me through grief, money troubles, health scares, and every single stage of motherhood. If anyone truly knew my heart, it was Patricia. "You seem distracted," she said. I smiled. "Just thinking." "Dangerous hobby," she teased. I laughed. "I really want to do something special for Lauren." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "For your retirement?" I nodded. "Not exactly." She waited. I just stared out the kitchen window. "You know what I realized recently?" "What?" "Lauren doesn't know my story." Patricia looked confused. "Of course she does." "No," I said quietly. "She knows facts, not my story." The difference mattered. Lauren knew I worked as a nurse. She knew I raised her alone. She knew life was hard after Michael died. But knowing facts is not the same as understanding sacrifice. She never saw the countless choices that shaped her life. Her opportunities always looked effortless from her perspective. She never saw the heavy cost, and honestly, that was never her fault. I had hidden that cost. I wanted her childhood to feel safe, her future to feel open. I never wanted her carrying the heavy burden of my struggles. But now, with retirement so close, I felt this growing need to share those memories. Not for praise or sympathy, but simply because I wanted connection. I wanted my daughter to understand who I actually was, beyond just being her mother. That conversation planted the seed of an idea. A few days later, I drove to a craft store, then another, then a small shop downtown. For weeks, I quietly gathered wood, decorative paper, photographs, envelopes, and ribbons. The project consumed almost every free evening. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about something. The centerpiece would be a handcrafted memory box. Nothing expensive or flashy, but something deeply meaningful. At least, meaningful to me. I started with photographs, hundreds of them. Some were stored in old albums, others tucked inside drawers and dark closets. A few had been hidden away inside books for years. I spread them all across my dining room table. Pictures of Lauren as a baby, Lauren learning to ride her bicycle, Lauren dressed as a princess for Halloween, holding her first report card, her graduation day, Lauren holding her newborn baby, Noah. Every single photograph carried a story, and every story carried a sacrifice. As I sorted through them, the memories flooded back. I remembered sleeping in hospital break rooms because I couldn't afford childcare. I remembered eating peanut butter sandwiches for weeks just so Lauren could go on school field trips. I remembered crying in my car after paying tuition bills, not knowing how I would cover my mortgage. But I never once regretted those choices. Not once. Because every difficult moment was deeply connected to something beautiful, my daughter. But the photographs weren't enough. I wanted Lauren to hear my voice, not literally, but emotionally. So I started writing letters. Some were only a page long, while others stretched on. Letters about her childhood, and letters about Michael. Letters about the dreams I had for her, and the fears I never shared. Letters about the deep pride I felt watching her become a mother. One evening, I wrote until nearly midnight. When I finished, my tears had smudged the paper. I sat alone, holding that letter, actually considering throwing it away. It felt too personal, too vulnerable. But then I thought about all the years Lauren and I had spent talking only about schedules and practical details. Maybe that raw vulnerability was exactly what had been missing. So I kept writing. By the end of the month, the box held over 20 letters. Then I added another layer of old keepsakes, like my hospital badge from my first nursing job, a newspaper clipping from Lauren's academic awards, a tiny ballet slipper from her childhood dance classes, and a ticket stub from our only mother-daughter vacation. Small objects, massive memories. Each item represented a chapter of our lives together. Yet there was one final piece I had never shown anyone, not even Patricia. A small brass key attached to a silver chain. Simple, ordinary, and easy to overlook. But its true meaning was absolutely enormous. Years earlier, after finally paying off my mortgage, I bought a modest cabin near a lake in northern Ohio. It was never luxurious. It wasn't worth millions, but it was beautiful, peaceful, and private. The kind of place where families gathered and grandchildren could make lasting memories. For years, I had quietly maintained it, paying the taxes, handling repairs, and fixing up the place. Eventually, I made my decision. One day, the cabin would belong to Lauren. I never told her, not because it was a secret, but because I wanted that moment to feel truly special. The key inside that memory box symbolized her future. It represented trust, legacy, family, everything I hoped to leave behind for her. As retirement day drew closer, my excitement grew, maybe more than it honestly should have. I pictured Lauren opening the box, looking at the old photos, reading my letters, and finally understanding everything it took to build her life. I imagined tears, laughter, and tight hugs. Maybe we would spend the evening sharing memories and finally reconnecting. Maybe we could be close again. The closer the party got, the more I let myself believe in those possibilities. Just a week before I retired, Lauren called. She sounded distracted, busy as usual. "Mom, what do you want for a retirement gift?" she asked. I smiled and said, "I don't need anything." "Come on," she sighed. "No, really, you always say that." And it was true. I never needed expensive gifts or luxury. What I truly wanted couldn't be bought with money. I wanted time, connection, love, and respect. Things money can never guarantee. After we hung up, I stared at the memory box sitting on my dining room table, finished, ready, and waiting. The wood gleamed under the light. The letters were neatly arranged. Every photograph was organized chronologically. The brass key rested safe inside its velvet pouch. Everything was perfect. Or so I thought. I had no idea Lauren was expecting something entirely different from my retirement celebration. Something larger, more valuable, measured in dollars rather than memories. When the moment finally arrived, the gap between what I gave and what she wanted would change everything. The morning of my retirement party felt strangely emotional. I had imagined this day for years. 42 years of 12-hour shifts. 42 years of holidays spent inside cold hospital walls. 42 years of comforting strangers while carrying my own silent pain. And now, it was over. For the first time since I was 25, I had nowhere to be the following Monday. No alarm clock, no charts, no emergency calls, just pure freedom. At least, that was what everyone kept calling it. Yet, as I stood before my mirror that morning, adjusting my pearl earrings, freedom was not what I felt. I felt incredibly nervous, like a teenager getting ready for a first date. But the party itself was not what made me anxious. It was the memory box. For weeks, I had built up Lauren's reaction in my mind. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe expectations are dangerous things. The higher they build, the harder they crash down. But I simply couldn't help it. I loved my daughter, and deep down, I still held on to a tiny hope that she would finally understand everything I had never said out loud. The party was at a private room overlooking the Scioto River in Columbus. Several old co-workers came, along with a few neighbors and family members. Patricia arrived early to help. When she saw me carrying that memory box, she smiled and said, "There it is." I nodded, replying, "There it is." She squeezed my shoulder. "She is going to love it." I smiled and said, "I hope so." Even now, looking back, those words bring a dull ache. I hoped so, because I truly did. The memory box sat beside my chair all evening, wrapped beautifully in cream-colored paper with a silver ribbon tied around it. Nothing extravagant, just elegant, meaningful, and personal. Exactly the kind of gift I believed mattered most. The evening began beautifully. My former supervisor gave a beautiful speech. Co-workers shared stories. People laughed. People cried. And I even shed a few tears myself. When they handed me a plaque honoring my years of service, everyone stood up and applauded. For a few brief moments, I truly felt seen, appreciated, and valued. Not just as a mother or a widow, but as Monica Dunn, a woman who had dedicated her entire life to caring for others. It was one of the happiest moments I had felt in years. Then, Lauren arrived. She wasn't late, but she certainly wasn't early either. She walked in carrying an expensive handbag, talking loudly on her phone. Ethan followed with Noah behind them. As always, Ethan immediately began greeting everyone in the room. Noah ran over to hug me, but Lauren remained completely distracted. "Sorry," she muttered, hanging up. "Work has been absolute chaos." I just smiled. "It's fine," I replied, because that's what mothers say. It's fine, even when it isn't. Throughout dinner, she checked her screen constantly. I tried not to notice. I tried not to let it get to me. People have busy lives. They have responsibilities. Still, every glance at her phone felt like a reminder that something else mattered far more than this moment together. After dessert, Patricia stood up and raised her glass. "I think Monica deserves one last celebration tonight," she announced. The room cheered. Patricia pointed at the box. "Open your gift." My heart instantly began racing. This was the moment. The sole reason I had spent weeks poring over letters and memories. I carefully lifted the wrapped box. "Lauren," I said softly, "this is for you." She looked taken aback. "For me?" I nodded and said yes. The room fell completely quiet as everyone watched. She smiled politely, taking the package. For a split second, hope flared up again. Maybe this would be what we both needed to heal. Lauren untied the silver ribbon, tore away the paper, and lifted the wooden lid. The first thing she saw was a photo of herself at 6 years old, missing front teeth, holding a stuffed rabbit. It was one of my favorite pictures. She stared at it for a second, then picked up one of the letters, then another, and another. Her face began to change, not with emotion or gratitude, but with confusion, then growing impatience. The room stayed completely silent, waiting and watching. I watched her too, my smile slowly fading away. She flipped through the photos, noticed the velvet pouch, opened it, and examined the brass key. Then she looked up and rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Surely I had misunderstood. My own daughter wouldn't react like that. Not here, not now, and certainly not after everything. But then she let out a soft laugh. It was not a joyful laugh, but a dismissive one. Then she said those unforgettable words. "Mom, this is just a box of old stuff." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop. No one moved. Nobody spoke. Patricia stared at Lauren. Ethan's face tightened instantly, and even young Noah looked deeply uncomfortable. My heart sank so fast, it felt like a physical blow, like falling through ice. I stared down at the photos in the box, the ones I had spent hours organizing, letters containing actual pieces of my soul, memories I had carefully protected for decades. Old stuff. That was all she saw. Just old stuff. I forced a smile. What else could I do? Cry, argue, or beg her to understand? No. I just smiled and said, "Oh, maybe it means more to me than to you." Lauren shrugged. "I mean, it is nice. It is just—" She paused, laughing again. "I do not know. I thought it would be something else." Something else. Those words kept echoing in my head. Something else. Suddenly, that cabin key made sense. The confusion on her face finally made sense. My daughter had not expected memories. She had expected value. Real, financial value. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. While I spent weeks pouring love into preparing this gift, Lauren had spent those same weeks expecting something worth actual money. Ethan quickly stepped in to break the tension. Picking up a letter, he said, "This is actually incredible." His voice sounded completely sincere. "You made all this yourself?" I simply nodded. "It must have taken forever," he said. It did. Patricia spoke up next, calling it beautiful. Others quickly chimed in. The atmosphere slowly eased. Conversations started up again, and the evening moved on. But something deep inside had fundamentally shifted. Not out loud, but deep in my heart. A painful crack had formed, and no polite small talk could fix it. The rest of the night passed in a complete blur. I smiled, posed for pictures, accepted hugs, and played the happy retiree everyone expected. Under every smile, the same question haunted me. Why? Why did Lauren react like that? Where was the little girl who once treasured handwritten notes and family traditions? When did memories become worthless to her? When did I become someone she merely tolerated? Eventually, the party wound down. Guests started saying their goodbyes, giving hugs, and the room slowly emptied out. As I gathered my things to leave, I still believed the worst was behind me. I thought the humiliation of that moment would be my deepest wound. I was wrong. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home, I would accidentally overhear a conversation. It would reveal something much more painful than a rolled eye, forcing me to question everything I thought I knew about my own daughter. The party officially wrapped up around 9 o'clock. By that time, most guests had left, and the restaurant staff were clearing the tables. Patricia hugged me 3 separate times before heading out. Even young Noah wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "I like the box, Grandma." Those 6 words meant more to me than he could ever know. Sadly, they could not erase what happened. My drive home should have felt peaceful. Instead, I replayed my daughter's reaction on a loop. The eye roll, the laugh, the disappointment, and her words. Just a box of old stuff. Every single time I remembered it, another small piece of my heart fractured. Yet, I kept trying to defend her. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she was stressed. Or maybe I was being too sensitive. Mothers are incredibly good at making excuses for their kids, even when they are 42 years old. I got home just after 10, completely drained and ready to forget the whole night. I changed into comfy clothes and started unpacking a few retirement gifts. A coffee mug, books, gift cards, and flowers. Just the usual stuff. As I was setting things aside, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "You okay?" I stared at the screen, then started typing. "I am fine." The lie sat there on the screen. I almost deleted it. Instead, I hit send. Admitting the truth made it too real, and I was not ready. 15 minutes later, I realized my purse was missing. I checked everywhere. Nothing. Panic settled in my chest. I had left it at the venue. Thankfully, it was only a 15-minute drive back. I grabbed my keys and drove back. The parking lot was almost empty when I got there, and the main lights were dimmed. A young waiter recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Dunn?" "Yes?" "You left your purse." Pure relief washed over me. He smiled and told me it was in the private room. I thanked him and walked down the hall toward the mostly dark party space. Only a few dim lights were on. As I reached the door, I heard voices. Familiar voices. Lauren and Ethan. I froze in my tracks. Not to eavesdrop, but because I immediately knew my daughter's voice. The door was ajar, and they had no idea I was there. I was about to walk inside. Then, Lauren said something that stopped me cold. I really thought she was finally mentioning the cabin. My heart stopped. The cabin? The key? I stayed completely quiet. Ethan sighed. "Lauren, really? Did you expect your mom to announce an inheritance tonight?" Lauren let out a sharp, irritated laugh. "Well, not announce it, but come on, Ethan." She paused, then kept going. "She knows everything is coming to me eventually anyway. Everything." That word crushed my chest like a lead weight. I stood frozen outside, barely breathing. Ethan sounded highly uncomfortable. You should not talk about her like that. I am being realistic. No, he said firmly. You are being entitled. Silence. For a brief second, I felt grateful. At least someone in there understood how wrong this was. Then Lauren snapped, "You do not get it. Then explain it." A pause. "I have spent years helping her." I nearly scoffed. Helping me? With what? A birthday card? She forgot my surgery. She barely visited, rushing through our brief phone calls. But I stayed silent, just listening. "She's getting older," Lauren continued. "At some point, she'll need help managing everything." Ethan sighed. "That's not what tonight was about." "Maybe not. Then why are you upset?" The answer came immediately. Because I thought she was finally being practical. Practical? I felt physically ill. My retirement celebration, the memory box, the letters, the photos, my entire heart. And Lauren only cared about practicality, money, property, and assets. Not memories, not family, not love. I leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling so old. Ethan spoke quietly. "You hurt her." "No, I didn't, Lauren. I didn't. You rolled your eyes." I was disappointed. The honesty of that statement shocked me, not because she admitted it, but because she saw nothing wrong with it. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't apologetic. She believed her disappointment justified her behavior. Then came the words that changed everything. Words I would replay for weeks. The sentence that shattered every excuse I had been making for her. Lauren said, "Honestly, she should just start transferring things now instead of waiting." Silence. Complete silence. It felt like all the air had vanished from the hallway. Ethan paused. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded completely stunned. "She's your mother." "I know." "Do you hear yourself?" Lauren groaned. "Oh, stop acting like I'm talking about stealing from her." "Then what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about planning." Planning? The word felt cold, calculated, and cruel. She lowered her voice, but not enough. "I mean, eventually the house, the investments, the cabin, it's all coming to us anyway." Us. Not me. Not family memories. No emotional connection. Just assets, numbers, property, and things. For once, I stopped making excuses. I stopped blaming her stress, her work. I stopped blaming some misunderstanding, because that wasn't the problem. Lauren understood perfectly. She simply valued different things than I did. That realization hurt far more than any eye roll ever could. I backed away quietly, careful not to make a sound. I didn't care about my purse anymore. I didn't care about anything in that room. That conversation had already given me something far more important. The truth. The painful, undeniable truth. Moments later, I was back at the front desk. The clerk handed me my purse. I thanked him, walked out to my car, and just sat there in the dark, alone. The parking lot was almost empty, the city lights reflecting coldly against my windshield. For several minutes, I just stared ahead, not crying yet, just thinking. 42 years. 42 years of sacrifice. 42 years of putting my daughter first, and somehow she stopped seeing me as a person. Maybe she still loved me. I honestly didn't know. But she definitely saw my future through the lens of her inheritance. That much was clear. When the tears finally came, they fell quietly, one after another. Not dramatic or loud, just heartbreaking. Because the deepest grief wasn't about losing money or property. It wasn't even about losing respect. It was realizing that someone you love unconditionally is calculating your worth in a completely different way. Eventually, I started the engine. Driving home, one thought looped over and over. I wasn't angry yet. I was awake. And for the first time in years, I knew I needed answers. More than that, I had to protect myself. The next morning, I'd make a call. A call to someone I hadn't needed professionally in a very long time. My attorney, Daniel Harper, and that conversation would change everything. I called him the next morning at exactly 9, not because I was eager or angry, but because I couldn't stop thinking. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Lauren's voice. Everything is going to me eventually. By sunrise, I knew I needed clarity, not revenge, just clarity. Daniel Harper had been my attorney for nearly 20 years. He wasn't just competent, he was methodical, careful, the kind of man who never rushed. When his receptionist answered, I asked for an urgent meeting. He did. 2 hours later, I was sitting right across from him in his downtown Columbus office. Daniel looked exactly the same. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a pristine desk. The only real difference was that we both looked older. Life has a way of doing that, Monica, he said warmly. It's been a while, he smiled. Retirement treating you well? I laughed softly. Not exactly. His expression shifted instantly. What happened? For a brief second, I considered telling him everything, but I hesitated. Saying those things aloud makes them real, and I wasn't sure I was ready. Unfortunately, reality didn't care about my readiness. So I told him all of it. The memory box, the eye roll, the conversation outside the restaurant, the cabin, those comments about her inheritance, everything. Daniel just listened. When I finished, he sat in silence for a few seconds, not out of surprise, but because he was thinking. Finally, he folded his hands. What would you like to do? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. He nodded. That's fair. I don't want to overreact. Then don't. I appreciated that. Most people instantly choose sides, but Daniel never did. He preferred facts. Facts were safer, cleaner. Facts hurt less than emotions. Sometimes, anyway. I took a deep breath. I need to review everything. Everything? My estate plan. Daniel leaned back. That's easy enough. He opened a file drawer, pulled out a thick folder, and set it on the desk. Seeing my entire estate summarized inside a folder felt so strange. A lifetime reduced to paperwork. The house, the investments, retirement funds, insurance policies, the lake cabin, everything. Daniel slowly opened the file. Nothing had changed in years. I nodded in agreement. It was true. For almost all of my adult life, my estate planning had been completely straightforward. If I passed away, everything went to Lauren. Not just some of it, everything. The house, the cabin, the accounts, the investments, absolutely all of it. Back then, it made perfect sense. Lauren was my only child, so who else would inherit? As Daniel reviewed the documents one by one, I just stared at the pages. Every signature on those papers represented trust. Trust that my daughter would respect the sacrifices behind everything I built. Trust that she loved me as much as I loved her. Trust that family meant more than money. Suddenly, that trust felt incredibly fragile. Daniel finally looked up. Your current plan leaves about 95% of your estate to Lauren. I nodded. The number itself did not surprise me. What shocked me was how uncomfortable it suddenly made me feel. Do you want to change that? He asked. I hesitated. No, then I paused. Maybe. Daniel waited in silence. I do not know what I want yet, I admitted. That is okay, he replied. His kind voice almost made me cry. For the first time since that awful party, someone was not forcing me to make an instant decision. He let me think. Then, something unexpected happened. Daniel pulled out a second, much thinner folder. There is something else you should know, he said. My stomach tightened instantly. What is it? I asked. About 6 months ago, Lauren called my office. The room suddenly felt tiny. She did, I whispered. Yes, he said. I stared at him, asking why. She said she wanted to help organize your affairs. Organize my affairs. The phrase sounded familiar, too familiar. I remembered Lauren using those exact words before, just casual comments and questions I had barely noticed back then. What exactly did she ask? I demanded. Daniel opened the folder. General questions, like whether your estate documents were current. I remained silent. She asked if you had updated beneficiary information. Still nothing. And she asked if cabin ownership had been transferred. That hit hard, very hard. The cabin again. Always the cabin, Daniel continued. I did not provide details, obviously. Without your authorization, I could not. I truly appreciated his professionalism. Yet, the damage was already done. Those questions revealed everything. Lauren had not suddenly grown interested in my money just because I retired. She had been watching for months, maybe longer. The painful realization settled heavily in my chest. Daniel closed the folder. I did not think much of it then, he sighed. But now, I believe context matters. I nodded slowly. Context changed everything. A worried daughter asking about her mother is one thing. A daughter plotting over future assets while grumbling about her inheritance is something else entirely. The difference was massive. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, people hurried through downtown Columbus. Normal lives, normal problems. Meanwhile, my own world felt like it was crumbling. After a heavy silence, I turned back to Daniel. Am I being unfair? I asked. The question surprised me, but I needed his honest opinion. Daniel thought about it. No, he said. You do not think so? I asked. No, he replied. Because you are asking questions before making choices. Those words stayed with me. Questions before decisions. Logic before emotion. Maybe that was exactly what I needed right then. Not revenge and not punishment. Just understanding, boundaries, and protection. Things I had ignored for decades. I sat back down as Daniel watched me. Monica, may I offer some advice? He asked. For 42 years, you have cared for everyone else. I smiled sadly. That is just what nurses do. Yes, he agreed. But you are retired now. I looked at him, really looked at him. You need to ask yourself a different question. What question? I asked. His voice softened. What do you want? Not what Lauren wants, or what Ethan wants, or what society expects. What do I want? Honestly, I did not know. I had spent my whole life putting others first. The very question felt foreign, incredibly uncomfortable, and almost selfish. Sitting there, another truth slowly hit me. I was not angry because Lauren wanted money. The money was never the real issue. I was heartbroken because she valued the money more than she valued me. That was the wound. That was the ultimate betrayal. Daniel finally closed the file. We do not need to change anything today, he said. Relief washed over me. Thank you, I whispered. But I think you need time to consider your options. I nodded. I will. And Monica, he added, protect yourself emotionally before you protect your assets. I stared at him. That was easily the wisest advice I had heard all year, because the brutal truth was so simple. My heart had been vulnerable long before my money ever was. Leaving Daniel's office that afternoon, I carried no new paperwork, no revised will. I did not carry a plan for revenge either. I carried something far more valuable. Pure awareness. For the very first time, I saw my life clearly. And once you finally see the truth, it is impossible to unsee it. What I did not know yet was that someone else would soon show me a completely different kind of connection. A bond built not on greed, but gratitude. Not on entitlement, but kindness. Her name was Grace Walker. After my meeting with Daniel, I spent several quiet days trying to clear my head. I walked, I read, and I tried to stop staring at my phone, waiting for Lauren to call. It was incredibly hard. For years, my life revolved around others, patients, doctors, co-workers, and family. Now, retirement handed me something unfamiliar. Empty time. And time is dangerous when your heart is broken. It gives your mind too much room to wander. My thoughts wandered constantly. Back to that restaurant, back to Lauren, back to the crushing truth that I had spent years ignoring warning signs I did not want to face. One rainy Thursday, while cleaning a closet, I found an old hospital bracelet. Seeing it instantly dragged me 2 years back in time to one of the hardest moments of my life. A dark period I had not thought about in a very long time. That was the chapter that brought Grace Walker into my life. Back then, at 65, I was still working full-time, convinced I was indestructible, but my body had other plans. A routine doctor's visit uncovered something that needed immediate surgery. It wasn't life-threatening, but it meant hospital stay and weeks of recovery. After 40 years of caring for patients, suddenly becoming one myself felt incredibly surreal. I absolutely hated it. The helplessness, the loss of independence, having to ask for everything. Lying there while strangers did everything for me was miserable. That first night post-surgery was brutal. The heavy pain meds kept me in a fog, the room was freezing, and the monitors beeped endlessly. Even with doctors and nurses everywhere, I felt so deeply alone. Lauren dropped by briefly that afternoon, maybe 20 or 30 minutes tops. She dropped off some flowers, kept staring at her phone, muttered something about meetings, and left. Back then, I didn't blame her. She had a job, a home, a busy life. Or at least, that's the lie I told myself. She skipped the next day entirely, then stayed 15 minutes the day after. By day 4, it was just a text, no visit. Once again, I made excuses for her, choosing to be understanding. But deep down, it hurt. Of course I noticed. You always remember who actually shows up when you are at your weakest. Around 9 o'clock one evening, a young nurse walked in with warm tea. I can still see her so clearly. Ponytail, exhausted eyes, but a genuinely warm smile. She couldn't have been older than 29. "Trouble sleeping?" she asked. I smiled weakly. "Is it that obvious?" "A little," she replied, handing over the warm mug. "Chamomile, thank you." Most nurses would have rushed out, not out of cruelty, but because they're always swamped. Hospitals never rest, yet she stayed for a few minutes, just long enough to ask how I was doing, and actually listen. Long enough to make me feel like a human being instead of a chart number. That was Grace Walker. I thought she was just incredibly good at her job back then. Only later did I realize her kindness was just who she was. Over the next few days, Grace became my main nurse. Every time she was on shift, she popped in to check on me, far more than required. It wasn't annoying, just beautifully human. She remembered the little things, asking about my grandson, my retirement dreams, and even my late husband. And she actually listened to my answers, really listened. One night, she saw me looking at a family photo. "Is that your daughter?" she asked. I smiled. "Yes, she's beautiful," I said. "She really is," Grace agreed. "You must be proud." I am. And I was, despite everything. I would always be proud of her. Grace sat down at the edge of my bed. "My mother passed away when I was 12, she whispered. I stared at her, stunned. She shrugged. "Car accident." The connection hit me instantly. My Michael had died in a crash too. For a while we talked, not as nurse and patient, but as two souls bound by grief. By the time we finished, I felt this deep, sudden bond with her, as if we had bypassed all the small talk and landed right in the heart. As I recovered, our quiet talks continued. Nothing grand, nothing life-altering, just pure honesty. She opened up about nursing school, mountain of student loans, and endless double shifts. I shared stories of Lauren, of raising a child alone, and the heavy sacrifices mothers make. Sometimes we laughed, sometimes we shared stories, and sometimes we just sat in silence. And somehow, during a truly dark time in my life, Grace made that cold hospital room feel like home. The painful contrast between her and Lauren didn't hit me until later. Back then, I wasn't comparing them or keeping score. I wasn't searching for flaws. I was just thankful. After I went home, Grace and I kept in touch. Nothing major, just holiday cards, occasional texts, and little life updates here and there. It was a connection built naturally on mutual, genuine care. Then came the twist. A year down the road, she asked me to meet her for coffee. She was incredibly tense the whole time. Eventually, she confessed. She was drowning financially, not from reckless spending, but because life had simply become too expensive. Her dad was ill. Bills were piling up, and her student loans were crushing her. She was about to quit the advanced nursing program she loved so much. The heavy despair in her voice instantly reminded me of my own younger self. That tired mother who worked endless overtime to give Lauren a head start. After saying goodbye, I went home and couldn't stop thinking about her struggle. So I made a quiet, private decision that no one else knew. I called her school and paid off her entire tuition balance, anonymously, down to the last penny. I never meant for her to discover it. I didn't want the praise. Honestly, helping people had been my life's work. It felt simple, natural, and right. 3 months later, she somehow found out. I still have no idea how, but she called me, sobbing, on the phone. "Why would you do this?" she sobbed. I smiled, telling her someone once helped me. "No," she wept, "you didn't have to." She just kept repeating those words. You didn't have to. It haunted me because true gratitude sounds nothing like entitlement. Lauren always spoke as though everything was simply owed to her. But Grace saw kindness as an absolute miracle. That distinction meant far more than I understood back then. 2 years later, holding that old hospital band in my closet, it clicked. This memory wasn't actually about the surgery, my recovery, or even our sweet friendship. It was about clarity. Grace never asked for a thing, expected nothing from me, and never saw me as a meal ticket. She just valued me as a human being. And after all the heartbreak with Lauren, that was something I simply couldn't ignore anymore. For once, I let myself wonder about a question I had always feared asking. What if blood isn't what truly defines a family? What if the ones who cherish your heart deserve more than the ones who just expect your inheritance? The thought terrified me, but it stayed with me. And the more I let that sit, the harder it was to push away. Because while Lauren seemed obsessed with my estate planning, Grace only ever cared about me. Soon, a new chain of events would make that contrast impossible to ignore. After sitting with Daniel's words and thinking of Grace, I made a promise to myself. No more jumping to conclusions. No more expecting the worst. Most of all, I wanted to give Lauren every chance to prove me wrong. Deep down, a part of me desperately prayed I was wrong. What mother wants to accept that her daughter looks at her and only sees an inheritance? Not me. Not after 42 years of devotion. So, I watched instead of reacting. I wouldn't point fingers. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't bring up what she said at the restaurant. I would just watch. Truth has a way of showing up when you stop hiding from it. The first warning came a week later. Lauren called on a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing strange about that. But the length of the call was weird. Usually we talked for 5 or 10 minutes. This time, we went for nearly 40. Suddenly, a flicker of hope hit me. Maybe she actually missed her mom. Maybe we were finally reconnecting. We chatted about Noah's baseball games, the weather, my retirement garden, just normal, everyday things. Then the tone shifted, subtle, almost impossible to catch. Lauren asked casually, "Have you figured out what you're doing with all your retirement accounts?" I froze. It sounded harmless, but after everything, my guard was up instantly. "Not really," I said. She replied, "You should probably get it sorted out." "I will," I said. Another silence. Then, "What about the cabin?" There it was, the cabin. I kept my voice steady. "What about it?" "Oh, nothing." Her voice stayed breezy, too breezy. Just curious, she added. Curious. It brought back Daniel's files, the strange estate planning questions from months ago. That seemed to be her favorite word lately. We hung up, and when I put the phone down, a cold feeling washed over me. It wasn't anger. It was proof. One weird chat is just a fluke, but patterns don't lie, and the pattern was truly hardening. Over the next 2 weeks, the phone rang more than ever before. Every other day, sometimes daily. To anyone else, it looked like sweet concern, a daughter calling to check on her lonely mother. It almost looked beautiful. I almost believed it too, until I really started listening to her actual questions. First my health, then my insurance. Questions about my home, my investments, the legal paperwork, the taxes, and always, without fail, that cabin. Every conversation drifted right back there, like a compass pointing north. She called again one afternoon while I was out. Mom, have you considered putting someone else's name on your bank accounts? Just for convenience. I stopped dead in the grocery aisle. Convenience? Yeah, she laughed. You know, in case something happens. Something happens. Such a simple phrase. So incredibly heavy. I stared at the grocery shelves, trying to find my voice. I haven't thought about it. Well, you should. Why? It just makes things easier. Easier for who? I kept the question to myself. I already knew. That evening, I told Patricia. We were having dinner at my place. She listened in silence, then slowly put down her fork. Monica, she said quietly, you see it now, don't you? I sighed. Maybe. No, she whispered. You see it. Patricia always loved Lauren. She had been her biggest cheerleader, which made her words cut so much deeper. I don't want to believe it, I whispered. I know, she replied. Her sadness hurt because she wasn't arguing. She was just waiting for me to accept the truth. A few days later, it happened again. This time, I couldn't run from it. Lauren dropped by on Saturday morning uninvited. Strange. Before I retired, she was always too busy. Suddenly, she was wide open. She showed up with coffee and pastries. Warm, sweet, attentive. The loving daughter I missed so much. For a second, I felt awful for even doubting her. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe I let one bad moment ruin my trust. But we sat down, and within 20 minutes, she brought up my papers. I can help organize your files. I smiled. That's sweet. I've got a handle on them. Sure, she laughed, but it's a lot. Then her eyes darted toward my desk, right at the filing cabinet. It was a split-second look, but I caught it, because now I was watching her every move. After she left that afternoon, I opened the cabinet. My papers looked untouched. Still, a wave of protectiveness hit me. Not over the paper, but what it meant. My independence, my choices. For decades, I gave her everything. Money, time, energy, and love. Now, for the first time, I wondered if she had mistaken my endless generosity for an obligation. The next week brought another punch to the gut. A very specific text message. Mom, do you still have the original deed for the cabin? I stared at the message twice, then 3 times. It wasn't confusing, it was just impossible to misunderstand. I typed back slowly. Why? Her reply came instantly. Just curious. Curious. The same word, the same pattern. In that quiet moment, something in me shifted, not with anger, just a cold, silent realization, like ice starting to crack before anyone notices. I wasn't waiting for proof anymore. It was already piling up right in front of me. Every question, every call, every single chat. They all led straight back to my money, always back to ownership, back to what would eventually be hers, or what she already believed was hers. That night, I made a folder on my laptop, just a basic folder. I filled it with screenshots of texts, dates, chats, and notes. Not because I actually wanted to use them. I just wanted a record, something objective, something cold and factual. Daniel's voice echoed in my head. Questions before decisions. Facts before conclusions. So I gathered evidence, mostly to keep myself sane. Then, a few days later, my phone rang again. Lauren sounded way too excited this time. "Mom, I have an idea." Instantly, my stomach nodded. "What kind of idea?" "We need to meet and go through your financial paperwork." There it was, direct. No more hiding behind casual chatter. "No rush," she added quickly, "but it would be smart. Smart, practical, efficient." Her words kept shifting, but the goal never changed. For once, I chose not to play along. At least not fully. "I appreciate the offer," I said. Silence. Then she asked, "But?" I gave a sad smile. "But I think I am okay." The silence stretched out, heavy and cold. When she spoke, her voice had shifted. Not angry, just disappointed. The same letdown I heard when she opened that memory box. That realization chilled me to the bone. Maybe the memory box wasn't just a one-time thing. Maybe it was the first crack in a mask she was struggling to keep on. After we hung up, I stood staring out my living room window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful, peaceful shades of orange and gold. Still, a heavy dread settled over me. Lauren's questions were coming faster now, sharper, more targeted. Deep down, I had this sickening feeling that she wasn't done yet. Not even close. Something much bigger was coming. Something showing exactly how far she would go. The invitation arrived on Thursday afternoon. A simple text from Lauren. "Mom, let's do dinner Saturday. Just us and Ethan. We really want to see you." I stared at the glowing screen for a long, quiet moment. In a different world, that text would have filled me with joy. A family dinner, connection. Everything I wanted from my retirement. But reality was different now. Cold and unchanging. And it forced me to keep my guard up. Even so, I agreed to go. Not out of trust, but because I needed answers. Saturday night arrived, warm and clear. They lived in a wealthy Cincinnati suburb. Pristine lawns, luxury SUVs in every driveway. The picture of perfect suburban success. Ethan welcomed me warmly, just like always. "Good to see you, Monica." "You too," I replied as he gave me a real tight hug. I always loved Ethan for that. He never made me feel like some chore he had to cross off his list. Lauren came out next, beaming, almost too friendly. She gave me a kiss on the cheek, asked how I was, and offered a drink. The whole night felt overly rehearsed, like we were acting out a script, especially Lauren. At first, dinner was actually nice. We stuck to safe, easy topics. Noah's school, trip plans, local news, and the weather. Lauren laughed a bit too much, praised my outfit, and asked about my retirement. To an outsider, we looked like a perfect, happy family. But beneath the surface, I felt a thick tension. No one spoke it, but everyone was waiting. About 45 minutes into dinner, I found out why. Lauren stood up and walked into the other room. When she came back holding a thick folder, my stomach instantly clenched. There it was, the exact thing I knew was coming, yet dreaded. She sat down, slid the folder onto the table, and smiled. "I wanted to discuss something with you," she said. Of course she did. I looked at Ethan. His face tightened instantly, a subtle shift, but I caught it. He clearly knew what was coming and hated it. Lauren opened the folder, revealing a neat, organized stack of documents prepared well in advance. That small detail spoke volumes. This wasn't some spontaneous chat. It was a carefully designed plan. "Mom," she started, "I've been thinking so much about the future." The future. Always the future with her. I stayed quiet, just listening. "I know you're healthy," she said. "I mean it," she smiled. "But we have to be prepared." There was that word again. Prepare, plan, protect, organize. The words were always the same, just dressed up differently. "I spoke to an estate organization specialist," she said. Estate organization. How interesting. I looked down at the papers. The paperwork looked dense, legal, and highly complex. The kind of documents an ordinary person would gloss over. Luckily, I wasn't most people. I had spent the past weeks consulting with Daniel Harper, and he had taught me well. Read every single line, page, and clause, no exceptions. So, that's what I did. The table went dead silent as I slowly read through page after page. The more I read, the colder I became. This wasn't simple estate planning. This was a transfer of ownership, right now, not after I pass, immediately. The legal jargon was clear. Property rights, shared assets, management authority, changed beneficiaries. It wasn't blatant theft or anything illegal, but it stripped away my control and handed it directly to Lauren. I kept reading. Lauren watched me like a hawk, waiting for my reaction. Finally, I met her eyes. "What exactly is this?" Her smile faltered, just for a second. "Just paperwork," she murmured. I nearly laughed. "Paperwork for what, exactly?" She leaned closer. "To make things easier down the road. Easier later." I put the papers down. Complete silence fell over us until Ethan cleared his throat. He sounded incredibly tense, which startled me. Lauren snapped her head toward him, giving him a sharp, warning look. It was just a glance, but I caught it, and apparently so did Ethan. He looked away. Interesting. Very interesting. I turned back to Lauren. Why now? The question seemed simple, yet she struggled to answer. Clever, but that is not an answer. Another heavy pause. She tried again. "We will have to deal with this eventually," she said. Eventually. There it was, the word that gave her away. Eventually. That future she kept talking about. The one where my assets became hers. A future she seemed far too eager to organize. I folded my hands calmly. Years of nursing taught me something valuable. People reveal more when you stay calm. Anger closes conversations. Silence opens them. So I stayed quiet. Lauren, I asked, did Daniel Harper tell you to do this? The question hit harder than I expected. She froze. Not dramatically, but noticeably. That hesitation told me far more than any verbal answer could. No. Which was interesting, because he certainly had not. I already knew that. Then it hit me. She had no idea I met with Daniel. Not yet. Suddenly, her nervousness made sense. She assumed I was completely uninformed, totally unprepared, and easy to persuade. That realization cut deeper than I expected. It meant she saw me not as her mother, but as a vulnerable obstacle. An obstacle that needed management. I glanced at the paperwork, then quietly closed the folder. I am not signing anything. My voice was calm, firm, final. Lauren blinked. What? I am not signing anything. Absolute silence fell over the room. Ethan stared at the table. Lauren just stared at me. The warm atmosphere vanished instantly, like it was never there. For the first time tonight, I saw real frustration behind her smile. Raw, cold frustration. Mom, you haven't even considered it. I did. You only read it for 5 minutes. I read enough. Her jaw tightened. You are being stubborn, she snapped. The accusation surprised me, not because of its cruelty, but its speed. It was as if she expected resistance and rehearsed for it. Something shifted deep inside me. Another layer of denial shattered. The old Monica would have apologized, made excuses, and tried to keep the peace. But retirement changed me. Or maybe the truth did. I am just being careful. There is a difference. Lauren leaned back, visibly irritated. This would make everything easier, she said. I nodded. For who? The question hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable, and dangerous. Lauren did not answer because she could not do so honestly. Ethan finally spoke after minutes of silence. Maybe we should drop it. I looked at him, grateful. Lauren did not. Her face darkened. Why? Because your mom said no. Simple, reasonable, obvious. Yet Lauren seemed genuinely frustrated by the very idea. It deeply troubled me. No should have been enough, especially from the person who owned everything. Eventually, the conversation moved on, after a fashion. Dinner went on, but the warmth was gone for good. Something had been exposed, something we could never hide again. As I prepared to leave, Lauren hugged me goodbye. The embrace felt forced, disappointing, almost resentful. Driving home alone, I could not stop thinking about everything that had just transpired. That prepared folder, the documents, the intense pressure, her anger when I refused. For the first time, a dark, troubling possibility crossed my mind. Perhaps Lauren was not just planning for my future assets. Maybe she was simply running out of patience. If that was true, this situation was far more dangerous than I realized. For 3 days after that dinner, Lauren did not call me. For weeks, she had been contacting me constantly, checking in, offering help, asking endless questions, showing so much concern. Yet the moment I refused to sign, it all stopped. Not entirely, but noticeably. This silence was not absolute proof, of course. Still, it was another piece of a dark puzzle. I could no longer pretend I did not see the picture forming. On the 4th day, I stepped into the spare bedroom and stared at my memory box, the box that started everything. the one she called a chest of old junk. It sat on the bookshelf where I left it after my retirement party, quiet, untouched, nearly forgotten. Yet it felt heavier now than ever before. I carried it to the living room and set it gently on the coffee table. Slowly, I lifted the lid. The scent of aged paper washed over me. Photographs, letters, keepsakes, decades of a life left behind. I pulled out a photograph. Lauren, at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding my hand on her first day of school. I smiled, despite the pain. She had been so full of trust and love back then. I unfolded a letter, one I wrote for her retirement gift, a letter she had never bothered to read. Looking over the faded ink, I read about working double shifts for her dance lessons and driving through freezing storms just to watch her perform. I wrote about sleepless nights crying over unpaid bills and how fiercely proud I felt every single time she succeeded in life. Every word came from my soul, yet she never finished it. It hurt deeply, not because she threw away a gift, but because she rejected my entire life's devotion. I sat in the quiet for nearly an hour, remembering, thinking, grieving. Eventually, I reached a painful conclusion. My memory box had failed to do what I wanted. It brought no connection, no real understanding. It never reminded her of what truly mattered, probably because she never really looked inside. Suddenly, I knew exactly what had to be done. The next morning, I wrote a letter. Just a single page, simple, honest, and direct. No anger, no accusations, just the raw truth. When I finished, I placed it inside the memory box and shut the lid. An hour later, I mailed it at the shipping center, addressed to Lauren. No warning, no explanations, just the box and my letter. It arrived the next afternoon. I knew it because Lauren called less than an hour later. The second her name lit up my phone, I knew she'd opened it. I picked up, keeping my voice calm. "Hello, Mom." Her voice was incredibly tense. "Did you send me the memory box?" "Yes." Silence. A heavy, lingering silence. "Then why?" I stared out my kitchen window, watching the autumn leaves start to turn. Orange, gold, red. Beautiful, but temporary. My answer felt just like them. "Because it belongs to you." More silence. Then she asked, "What is this letter supposed to mean?" I already knew exactly which part had set her off. The whole letter was only a few paragraphs, but one line cut deeper than the rest. "You taught me what my love was worth to you." That arrow had hit its mark. "What part confused you?" I asked softly. Her anger flared instantly. "Mom," I waited, "you know exactly what I mean." I did, but I wanted her to say it out loud. "I don't understand why you're acting like this." The irony almost made me laugh. Acting like this. As if this pain had just appeared, instead of simmering for months, maybe even years. I took a slow, steady breath. "Lauren, what did you actually read? The letters?" A pause. A highly telling pause. "Well, some of them. Some, but not all." Naturally. I nodded, even though she couldn't see my face. "Did you read the graduation letter?" "No." "The one about your father?" "No." "The one about Noah?" "No." Silence. That told me everything I needed to know. She didn't care about the memories. She only cared about the fight, not the meaning, just the conflict. Finally, she spoke up. "You hurt my feelings." I was genuinely surprised, not because it was impossible, but because it felt so completely backward. I wanted to ask if she had any idea what she did to mine. Instead, I chose raw honesty. "You hurt mine first." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout, holding a truth we both couldn't outrun. When she finally spoke, her voice had softened just a bit. "I didn't mean to." Part of me actually believed her. Cruelty isn't always calculated. Sometimes it is just pure selfishness. Sometimes it is entitlement or simple carelessness, but the damage is identical. "I know." A quiet pause. Then she dropped a question that shifted everything. "Is this about the paperwork?" And there it was. Not my letters, not the photos, not even the retirement party. Just the paperwork, the assets, the inheritance, the things she actually valued. My heart sank. Even now, she didn't get it. "No?" "Then what is it about?" I stared at the empty chair across the table, the chair where Michael used to sit, the chair that had been vacant for decades. Suddenly, the truth was blindingly clear. It is about value. What does that mean? It means I spent weeks pouring my heart into something. Silence. And you dismissed it in less than a minute. Only her heavy breathing on the line. I kept going. "To you, it was just old junk." Another silence. Longer. Agonizing, but vital. Finally, she sighed. I think you're overreacting." Those words stung deeper than expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they proved how little she understood, or how little she actually wanted to. We hung up shortly after. No shouting, no venom, just a cold, quiet distance. The kind of space that grows when two people exist in completely different worlds. I sat in the quiet for several minutes after the call ended. Then, the phone rang again. This time it was Ethan. Intriguing. I picked up. "Hello, Monica." His voice was hesitant, almost completely nervous. "Hi, Ethan. I hope I'm not bothering you." "You're not." A quiet beat. Then he caught me off guard. I read the letters. I shut my eyes. For a moment, breath caught in my throat. Those 4 words meant everything. Someone actually read them. Someone cared enough to look. I see. They were beautiful. A wave of emotion hit my chest. "Thank you." Another pause. And then Ethan said something I will carry forever. "Lauren doesn't understand what those letters cost you." Cost. Not money or property or assets, but the tears, the sacrifice, the love. Finally, someone saw it. For the first time in ages, I felt truly seen. Truly seen. Yet his words also highlighted a painful truth. If Ethan could value that memory box, why was Lauren so blind to it? The answer was terrifying, because I was starting to realize this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate choice. And if that was the case, the hard decisions lying ahead of me grew clearer with each passing day. 3 days after talking to Ethan, I returned to Daniel Harper's office. I wasn't searching for answers anymore. I was there to make a choice. And that made all the difference. Our first meeting was about understanding my situation. This second one was about deciding exactly how I was going to handle it. Daniel welcomed me with his usual calm demeanor, but one look at my face told him that everything had shifted. "You've made up your mind." It wasn't a question. I nodded. Mostly. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Tell me." I took my seat. For a few quiet seconds, I stared down at the file on my lap. Inside were legal documents, asset sheets, and absolute clarity. Weeks ago, I was acting purely out of hurt and emotion. Now, I stood firmly in reality. The difference was staggering. "I don't want to punish Lauren." Daniel nodded. "Good. I mean it." "I know." I exhaled slowly, but I won't reward actions that tear people down anymore. Saying those words felt bizarre. Not because they weren't true, but because I had spent a lifetime doing the exact opposite. Making excuses, forgiving instantly, giving without boundaries, and shielding everyone from the consequences. Especially my own daughter. Daniel stayed quiet, giving me room to speak. I keep asking myself one crucial question. What's that? If I weren't her mother, would I tolerate this behavior from anyone else? The truth hit instantly. No, not a chance. I would never put up with that from a friend, a coworker, or a neighbor. Yet, motherhood convinced me to accept things I never would elsewhere. Facing that truth was painful but necessary. Daniel leaned forward, asking what I wanted my estate to reflect. The question caught me completely off guard. Not who, but what. The distinction was huge. He wasn't asking where my money should go, but what values should guide my final decision. I thought it over. Finally, I answered, "Gratitude." He nodded. "What else?" "Compassion," I said. "Anything else?" I smiled sadly. "People who actually care." The room fell quiet. It was a thoughtful silence, not an awkward one. Then Daniel opened a legal pad. "Let's start there," he said. For the next 2 hours, we went over everything I owned. The house, the cabin, investments, savings, insurance, every single asset. For years, almost everything was supposed to go to Lauren. Now, I was questioning that whole arrangement. Not because I stopped loving my daughter, that could never happen, but because love and accountability are not opposites. At least, they shouldn't be. Going through those numbers made me think of Grace. Her gratitude, her genuine kindness, and how she treated me when she had absolutely nothing to gain. Then I thought about nursing, the profession that shaped my entire life. I thought of the young nurses drowning under crushing student debt, the future caregivers who would eventually look after people like me. A quiet idea began taking shape, and by noon, it became a solid plan. Daniel studied his notes. "You want to set up a scholarship fund?" "Yes." "For nursing students?" "Yes." The answer felt deeply right, almost immediately. That money would open doors. It would create real opportunities, just as others had once opened doors for me. Daniel wrote that down. "How much are we talking?" I gave him a number. He raised his eyebrows, not because the amount was outrageous, but because it was substantial. I nodded, telling him I had thought it through. Then came a decision that surprised even me. "I want Grace included," I told him. Daniel looked up. The nurse? Yes. He waited, giving me space to explain. So I did. The surgery, our friendship, her classes, her gratitude, her compassion, everything. When I finished, Daniel smiled. She sounds remarkable. She is, I said, the answer coming easily because it was true, absolutely true. We weighed several options, eventually settling on a meaningful but reasonable amount. Enough to help, not enough to cause any complications. The choice felt balanced and fair. Then another idea came to me, one that had been growing quietly in my mind. A local nonprofit that helped elderly folks who had been financially exploited by their own relatives. I had volunteered there before. Their stories were heartbreaking. Parents manipulated, grandparents pressured, widows stripped of their assets, good people losing everything because they trusted the wrong family. The more I learned about those painful situations, the more determined I became. Part of my estate would support them too. Daniel took notes methodically, carefully. Then we reached the hardest part of the conversation. Lauren, my daughter, the little girl I raised and loved for decades. The woman who broke my heart, but whom I still loved anyway. What about her? Daniel asked gently. The question hung in the air, heavy, complicated, and painful. Looking down at my hands, I saw my younger self, a tired widow pulling overnight hospital shifts, sacrificing everything for her child. Then I snapped back to the present, the eye rolls, the paperwork, the cold conversations, the entitlement. Both versions existed at once, and I couldn't ignore either. Finally, I spoke. I don't want to disinherit her. Daniel nodded slowly. He expected that because, despite everything, I wasn't looking for revenge. I had no interest in cruelty, only truth. The truth was, Lauren was still my daughter. That would never change, but neither would the consequences of her choices. I want her to receive something truly meaningful. Daniel waited. Then I surprised us both with my answer. The memory box. His expression softened. The original? Yes. I smiled sadly, along with the letters. The irony was not lost on either of us. The item she dismissed, the item she considered worthless and barely even examined. Not because I wanted to punish her. I wanted to give her one final chance to understand, one last opportunity to see me, to really see me. Then I added another condition, one Daniel said was unusual, but legally possible. A personal letter delivered with the memory box, explaining every decision, every reason, every lesson. It wouldn't be angry or vindictive, just honest. The kind of letter a mother writes when she still hopes her child will learn something. Daniel finished writing, then leaned back. How do you feel? His question caught me off guard. I thought about it, then answered truthfully. Peaceful, and I meant it. For the first time since my retirement party, I felt something close to actual peace. Not happiness, not relief, but pure peace. My choices reflected my values, not my anger or disappointment, but my values. That made all the difference. Before I left, Daniel went over the basic structure one last time. The scholarship, Grace, the Senior Advocacy Organization, Noah's Educational Fund, Lauren's revised inheritance. Everything felt balanced, intentional, and meaningful. As I stood up, Daniel shared one final thought. You know, Monica, most people change their wills out of anger. I smiled. And me? I think you're changing yours because you're finally being honest. Those words stayed with me all the way home because he was right. This wasn't about punishment. It was about raw honesty. Honesty about who had actually stood by me. Honesty about what truly mattered. And honesty about the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Lauren still had no clue what I had decided, but I knew one thing for sure. When the truth finally came out, it would change everything. The storm hit much sooner than I expected. Less than 2 weeks after meeting with Daniel, Lauren figured out that things had shifted. To this day, I still don't know how. Maybe she called another lawyer, or noticed the paperwork, or maybe she just sensed she was losing control of a situation she thought she entirely owned. Whatever sparked it, she called me on a Tuesday morning. The second I picked up, I knew this wasn't going to be a normal call. Mom. Her voice was sharp, tight, and angry. I set down my coffee. Good morning to you, too. Did you change your will? There it was. No greeting, no small talk, just straight to the point. I stared out the kitchen window, stunned by the sheer boldness of her question, even though I knew the answer. A normal daughter would ask how her mother was doing. Lauren only cared about paperwork. Why do you ask? Because I heard you met with Daniel. Interesting. Very interesting. I did. Did you change it? I could have lied. I could have dodged it, but I was done running, done pretending. I was tired of keeping everyone else comfortable while I suffered. Yes. The silence hung for a second. Then the dam broke. What is wrong with you? I pulled the phone from my ear, shocked by her sheer audacity. What? Why would you do that? I took a slow, steady breath. Lauren, no, her voice roared. I want an answer. Her pure entitlement shocked me. Not because it was new, but because I could no longer ignore it. She wasn't asking why I made the choice. She was demanding I justify my right to make one. That distinction cut deep. Would you like to come over? I asked quietly. What? We should discuss this face to face. I could hear the surprise in her silence. Maybe she expected me to get defensive, feel guilty, or make excuses. Instead, I offered a real conversation. After a tense pause, she agreed. 3 hours later, Lauren pulled into my driveway. She was alone, no Ethan, just her. The second she stepped through the door, I saw the fury. Not hurt, not disappointed, just raw anger. Her jaw was clenched, her posture stiff, her eyes burning with pure frustration. I suddenly saw the little girl who used to throw tantrums when she didn't get her way. It was deeply unsettling. We sat across from each other in the living room. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, Lauren cut through the silence. How much did you change? I blinked. No hello, no how are you, just how much did you change? I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so revealing, extremely revealing. I don't think that's where we should start. Then where? I leaned back in my chair. Why are you so upset? It felt like a reasonable question. Her answer was instant. Because this isn't fair. Fair. That word again. I'd heard it so many times. Usually from people who wanted something from me. What isn't fair? You changing everything. I nodded slowly. What exactly belongs to you right now? The question caught her off guard, leaving her utterly confused. What? What belongs to you right now? She didn't answer because she couldn't. Nothing belonged to her. Not legally, not morally, not practically. Everything was still mine, and that reality clearly irritated her. I'm your daughter. Yes. Then a heavy silence fell. For a split second, doubt flickered across her face before vanishing back into anger. I've always been your beneficiary. What a telling choice of words. Beneficiary. Not daughter, not family, beneficiary. That distinction broke my heart. You know, I said softly, when you were 8 years old, you used to tell everyone how proud you were to be my daughter. She actually rolled her eyes, just like she did at my retirement party. We aren't talking about when I was 8 years old. No, I nodded. We're talking about now. The room went dead silent. Then she leaned forward. Are you giving my inheritance away? The blunt question stunned me. Not because she asked, but because she skipped all the emotion. No concern, no curiosity, no reflection, just straight to her inheritance. A painful truth suddenly hit me. This conversation wasn't about our relationship, at least not to her. It was solely about assets. Realizing that hurt more than I ever expected. I looked directly into her eyes. When did you start seeing me as property? My question hit home. Her expression shifted instantly. What? When did that happen? It didn't. Then why is this your primary concern? Silence. Another heavy, suffocating silence she couldn't escape. Instead of answering me, she shifted tactics. A classic move I recognized instantly. Someone is influencing you. There it was, the accusation. I almost smiled because Daniel had predicted it. Influencing me? Yes. She crossed her arms. This doesn't sound like you. I nodded slowly. Why? Because you've always taken care of family. I still do. Then why are you doing this? The answer was easy. I had spent weeks thinking about it. Taking care of family and enabling bad behavior are not the same. My words hit their mark. I saw it immediately. Lauren stood up abruptly. You think I'm a bad person? No. Then what? I inhaled deeply. I think you have become entitled. The room froze. Nobody likes hearing the truth, especially when they know deep down it is true. Lauren stared at me as if I'd slapped her across the face. Then her features hardened. What about Grace? There it was, her name. The first time she had said it. What about her? I remained calm. I know she's involved somehow. She sounded incredibly jealous, threatened, and possessive. I suddenly found myself wondering exactly how much she actually knew. Not enough, but enough to worry her. Grace isn't involved in this. She's manipulating you. That was so absurd I actually laughed. A quiet, honest laugh. Grace manipulating me? The woman who never asked for a thing and thanked me endlessly for kindness she never expected. The gap between Grace and Lauren felt agonizing. No, I shook my head. She isn't. Lauren grew more frustrated. You don't know what you're doing. I stared at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I stopped seeing my daughter as a child. I saw her as an adult responsible for her own choices. Someone who expected access to things she had never earned. An adult who believed love automatically meant entitlement. Someone mistaking my generosity for an obligation. It was heartbreaking, but it brought absolute clarity. Then Lauren crossed a line I never expected. "You've changed." I smiled sadly. "You're right." It caught her off guard because it was true. I had changed. Not into someone cruel, but someone awake. I finally understood that boundaries are not punishments. They are there to protect us. Her voice grew colder. "If this keeps up, I might have to check if you're even capable of making these decisions." The heavy, ugly threat hung in the air. My heart sank, not because I was afraid, but from sheer disappointment. Deep, crushing disappointment. She was hinting I was mentally unfit, not because she believed it, but to challenge my choices. That realization shattered something deep inside me. My last illusion, my last excuse, my final shred of denial. In that exact moment, I saw everything with absolute certainty. Lauren wasn't just angry about the money anymore. She was willing to question my own mind just to regain control. What she didn't know was that I had already anticipated that possibility. I'd spent weeks preparing. The meeting took place 10 days later. By then, Lauren had cooled off enough to stop threatening me over the phone, at least openly. But my lawyer, Daniel Harper, and I knew this was far from over. That talk at my house shifted everything. The masks were slipping. And once people reveal their true priorities, it becomes incredibly hard for them to hide them again. The meeting was actually Lauren's idea, not mine or Daniel's. She called, demanding we sit down. She wanted answers. She wanted explanations. But mostly, I knew she wanted control. We met at Daniel's office. Neutral, professional territory, where facts mattered much more than raw emotions. When I walked in, Daniel and Lauren were already waiting. To my surprise, Ethan was there too. Seeing him, I instantly understood. This was no longer just about me. Something had shifted in their marriage, and the thick tension between them was impossible to ignore. Lauren sat rigid, arms crossed and jaw tight. Ethan sat right beside her, but the emotional distance between them was vast, the kind born when trust begins cracking. Daniel greeted us and closed the conference room door before sitting down. For a few heavy moments, nobody said a word. Finally, Lauren broke the silence. "Let's stop pretending." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Pretending?" "Yes." She looked straight at me. "I want to know exactly what's going on." I stayed completely calm. "Okay." My simple response only seemed to frustrate her. "Yes." I folded my hands. "What would you like to know?" Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you doing this?" The same old question, but now in a lawyer's office instead of my living room. And somehow the answer felt even clearer to me. "I'm making decisions about my estate." "No," Lauren shook her head. "I mean, why are you punishing me?" "Punishing?" I looked at Daniel, then back at Lauren. "Do you honestly believe that is what this is?" "Yes." Her answer came instantly, too fast, as if she had practiced it. I nodded slowly and reached into my purse. Lauren watched with curiosity while Daniel stayed quiet. I pulled out several printed pages, just simple sheets of paper, nothing dramatic, just cold evidence. The first page was a screenshot of a text, a message asking about the cabin deed. The second page showed another conversation. There were questions about account ownership, asset transfers, and all kinds of paperwork. Question after question, the exact same pattern. I set the pages down. Lauren's face changed instantly, not with panic, but with recognition. She knew exactly what she was seeing. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice fading. "You don't understand?" I kept my voice entirely calm. "The questions seem pretty clear to me." Lauren glanced at Ethan, then back at me. "Those were normal questions." "Perhaps," I nodded indifferently. The room fell silent. I slid another page across, then another, then another. A full timeline of dates, messages, and private conversations. Weeks of her growing interest in my money. Weeks of incredibly specific questions. Weeks of documented behavior. I hadn't put this together for a courtroom. I did it for myself, to prove I wasn't imagining things or letting emotion distort reality. Now it sat on the table. Cold reality in black and white. Lauren's anger flared again. "You're making this look worse than it is." Before I could reply, Ethan finally spoke up for the first time today. "Are they wrong?" The entire room froze. Lauren stared at him, genuinely shocked. She had expected his support, not his questions. "Ethan, no." But his voice stayed calm, painfully calm. "Answer the question." For a second, nobody moved. Then Lauren let out a nervous laugh. "This is ridiculous." But Ethan didn't smile or look away. He just waited. And suddenly, the truth clicked for me. This was far from their first argument about this. The tension I'd noticed earlier suddenly made total sense. The fight had already started at home. Now it was just spilling out in public. Daniel stayed quiet, watching closely like lawyers do. Finally, Lauren spoke. "I was only trying to help." Ethan nodded. Maybe. His response surprised us all, especially me. It wasn't an accusation. It was just brutal honesty. But somewhere along the way, he added, "I think you stopped hearing yourself." The words landed incredibly hard. Lauren stared at him. "You think I'm the bad guy?" "No," his voice softened. "I just think you've become focused on the wrong things." The room felt smaller, tighter, thick with emotion. For the first time, someone else was saying what needed to be said, not with anger or cruelty, just raw honesty. Lauren's eyes immediately filled with tears. But this time, those tears felt different. It wasn't grief or regret, but pure frustration. She was losing an argument, not realizing her mistakes. Not yet, anyway. Then, she turned to face me. "You've been talking about me behind my back," she accused. It stung because it wasn't true. "You're telling people things." I just shook my head. "No," Daniel said, speaking up for the first time. "Lauren." She looked at him. "Your mother hasn't had to tell anyone anything." Total silence. Daniel gently tapped the papers. The messages speak for themselves. The words hung heavy in the air because they were true. Painfully true. No spin was necessary. No manipulation. No exaggeration. Just her own words, her own demands, and her own selfish priorities. The room stayed quiet. Then, something unexpected happened. Ethan reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and set it on the table. "What's that?" Lauren asked. His face fell, sad, disappointed, and incredibly tired. "I read the letters," he said. The memory box she had dismissed. Lauren looked confused. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Everything," he replied. "It had everything to do with it." Ethan looked directly at her. "Because I finally understood what your mother wanted to give you." The silence after that felt endless. I could barely breathe. Not from the tension, but because someone finally understood. Someone had actually gotten it. Ethan went on, his voice still calm. "You thought she was giving you property. She was giving you herself." The words struck a chord in all of us, especially Lauren. For the first time, I watched uncertainty replace her anger. Only briefly, but it was there, a tiny crack. Then her eyes drifted back to the papers, to the hard truth she couldn't run from anymore. Something shifted inside her. Not completely, not yet, but enough. For the first time since this nightmare started, she stopped fighting. No arguments, no excuses. She just sat there in silence. In that quiet moment, it hit me. I never wanted to humiliate her, and I never wanted revenge. I only wanted the truth, and the truth was finally out. I couldn't control whether Lauren accepted it, but she had heard it. We all did, and so did she. As we wrapped up the meeting, I had this heavy, sinking feeling that the real fallout was only just beginning. Not legal consequences, but deeply personal ones. The kind that follow you home and stare back at you in the mirror. The kind that force you to ask if you have become someone you don't even recognize. The weeks after that meeting in Daniel's office were surprisingly quiet. Not peaceful, though, just quiet. There is a difference. Peace comes from resolution. Silence comes from avoidance. And Lauren was avoiding everything. Maybe she was avoiding me, or maybe herself and those harsh truths from the meeting. Either way, our communication completely dried up. Her daily calls stopped. The endless questions vanished. Her sudden interest in my estate paperwork evaporated completely. For the first time in months, my phone was quiet. Part of me felt relieved, but another part ached. No matter what she had done, Lauren was still my daughter. I couldn't just wake up and stop loving her. Mothers don't work that way. At least I don't. Love remained. Trust didn't. Learning to separate love from trust became one of the hardest lessons of my life. A few days later, Ethan called. Not about money or legal stuff, just to check in on me. "How are you doing?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. We had lived in conflict for so long that simple kindness felt almost foreign. "I'm okay." "Really?" I smiled. "Mostly." He gave a soft laugh. That's probably the most honest answer you could give. We talked for nearly an hour about Noah, my retirement, and just life. Eventually, we naturally drifted toward talking about Lauren. "She's struggling," Ethan admitted. I looked out my kitchen window. Autumn had settled in and dry leaves covered the yard. The changing season felt fitting. Things ending, fading, preparing for winter. "What kind of struggling?" I asked. A long pause followed. Then Ethan answered carefully. I think she's realizing how this looks. That stuck with me, because appearances weren't the real problem. Reality was. But I understood. For maybe the first time in her life, Lauren had to look at her actions through someone else's eyes. That can be a painful experience, especially when the reflection isn't flattering. A week later, I met up with Patricia for lunch. We sat outside a small cafe overlooking a park. Kids played, dogs chased tennis balls. Normal life just kept moving, no matter how heavy my own world felt. Patricia listened as I caught her up. Then she asked, "Do you regret it?" I knew exactly what she was asking. The will, the boundaries, the confrontation, all of it. I thought about it, then shook my head. No. She smiled. Good, she said. But I do regret that it had to happen. That felt closer to the truth, because I never wanted any of this. I never wanted conflict or distance. I never wanted my own daughter questioning my decisions or threatening my independence. I just wanted simple respect, understanding, and love. The fact that basic love had become so complicated still hurt. Then, something unexpected happened. Grace invited me to a community fundraiser, a scholarship event for nursing students. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I accepted immediately. The event was beautiful. Seeing young nurses, future caregivers, all filled with purpose and hope. For the first time in forever, I felt energized, useful, and connected. Several students shared stories of financial hardship, of dreams they were struggling to afford. Listening to them only reinforced what I already knew. The decisions I made about my estate weren't out of anger. They were people with actual values, and that thought brought me peace. Right before the night ended, Grace pulled me aside. She said, "I have something to tell you." She gave me a nervous smile. "What is it?" I got promoted. The pride in her voice made me smile instantly. "Grace, that is wonderful." She laughed. "I wanted you to know first." The words caught me completely off guard, not because of the job, but because she chose me. No agenda, no expectations, just connection. A brief moment of gratitude and real connection, shared simply because she cared. Driving home that night, I found myself thinking about what family really means. Not blood and not inheritance. Real family are the ones who celebrate your victories, those who show up when things get hard, valuing you instead of what you own. That thought lingered for days. Then, nearly 3 weeks later, a handwritten letter arrived out of the blue. The return address was Lauren's. I just stared at that envelope for several minutes before opening it. My hands were actually shaking, not because I feared what was inside, but because I hoped. And hope can be dangerous, especially after so much disappointment. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a single letter, 3 pages long. I read every word, slowly taking it in. Then I read it again. Lauren apologized. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real, far more genuine than anything she had sent me in months. She admitted she had focused on the wrong things, realizing how much she had taken for granted. She admitted she had read more letters from the memory box. That caught my attention immediately, especially the one about Michael, her father, the letter she had previously refused to read. She wrote that it made her cry. For a long time after finishing it, I sat in silence, completely unsure of how to feel. Hopeful, cautious, sad, relieved, all at once. The apology did not erase the past. It could not. Trust is not rebuilt overnight, but it mattered because accountability matters. Growth takes effort. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was Lauren. For several seconds, I just stared at the screen. Then I answered. Hello? Silence. Then, Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded different, softer, smaller, almost vulnerable. The talk that followed was not magical. There were no grand speeches, no instant healing. Real life rarely works that way. Instead, there was honesty. Awkward honesty, painful honesty, but absolutely necessary honesty. She apologized again. I listened, and I accepted it. But I did not restore everything right away, and surprisingly, she did not ask me to. That detail mattered more than any of her words. For the first time, the conversation was not about inheritance or ownership. It was not about future assets. It was about us, mother and daughter, two flawed people trying to navigate the damage between us. When the call ended, I felt something unfamiliar. Not certainty, but possibility. The hope that Lauren might actually learn from all of this. The possibility that people can change when facing uncomfortable truths. The hope that healing might still exist. But healing does not mean forgetting or surrendering my boundaries. Those hard lessons had cost me too much to lose. Soon, Lauren and I would have one final talk. A conversation about the memory box, the will, love, and the deep difference between inheritance and legacy, a difference she was only beginning to grasp. 3 weeks after her letter arrived, we finally met at the lake cabin. This cabin had somehow become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong between us. For months, it represented only ownership, inheritance, and conflict. I wanted it to mean something else before our story ended. Understanding. The drive north was quiet and peaceful. The trees wore deep autumn colors, and the lake reflected the gray morning sky like polished glass. I arrived first, not because I was eager, but because I needed a few quiet moments alone. This cabin had always been my sanctuary, a place where life slowed down, the noise faded, and truth was easier to hear. I unlocked the door, and the familiar scent of cedar greeted me instantly. The memories flooded in. Family weekends, summer cookouts, Noah fishing off the dock, and quiet evenings spent reading by the fireplace. This place held pieces of my very life. Perhaps that is why I protected it so fiercely. Not because of its market value, but its meaning. About 20 minutes later, Lauren pulled up. She stepped inside slowly, looking incredibly nervous. For once, she was uncertain, not defensive, not angry, just completely uncertain. We hugged, a simple, quiet embrace with no drama, yet it felt like a real beginning. We sat at the kitchen table, the exact spot where I had once pictured future family gatherings. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Lauren broke the silence. I have been reading the letters. I smiled faintly. All of them? She nodded 3 times, and a tight wave of emotion hit my chest. Not because she finally read them, but because she finally understood why they existed. Her eyes pooled with tears. I did not see it, she whispered. The words came out quiet, broken, and painfully honest. I know. No, she said. She shook her head. You don't understand. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. I thought I understood your life. Looking down at the table, she added, but I only knew the easy version. The truth hurt, but it also brought healing because it was real. For decades, I had hidden the hard parts, the sacrifices, the loneliness, fear, and exhaustion. I had protected Lauren from all of those realities, and by doing that, I might have accidentally hidden the true cost of love. Lauren wiped her eyes. The letter about college destroyed me. I knew exactly which one she meant. The one describing the nights I skipped meals to pay tuition. The second jobs, the endless overtime shifts, and the heavy fears I never once shared. I had no idea. I know. Silence fell again. Not an awkward silence, but a healing one. The kind of silence that falls when people stop defending themselves and just listen. Finally, Lauren spoke again. I became someone I don't like. Her honesty shocked me, not because it was false, but because she finally admitted it. I got comfortable, she whispered. She gave a bitter laugh. Maybe that is the kindest way to put it. I stayed silent. This was her confession, not mine. She kept going. I started assuming things, she said. That word hung heavily between us. Accurate. Dangerous. I assumed the house would eventually be mine. I nodded. She continued. I assumed the cabin would be mine. I nodded again. I assumed everything would be mine. The ugly truth, finally out. Not hidden, not disguised, not wrapped in words like planning or convenience. Just raw truth. Then, my daughter looked right at me. And the worst part is, I waited. I stopped seeing you. Tears blurred my eyes instantly. That single sentence captured every argument and painful moment. She had not stopped loving me entirely. My daughter had simply stopped seeing me as a mother, a person, a real human being. Instead, I had slowly become just a piece of her future plans and expectations. Somewhere along the line, she forgot I was still alive, still feeling, still making choices. Seeing that realization hit her absolutely broke me. Strangely, it hurt less than I expected. Accountability changes things, not all at once, but in a way that truly matters. After a heavy silence, my daughter asked the question I knew was coming. What happens now? I smiled softly, knowing the answer was clear. Now, I said. She nodded. Now we move forward. Confusion crossed her face. That's it? I smiled. What did you expect? I don't know, she whispered. Maybe for you to say I ruined everything. The deep sadness in her eyes broke my heart. Despite it all, she was still my daughter. And despite everything, I still loved her. No, I whispered. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You hurt me. She nodded. I know, but hurting me does not mean losing me. Those words completely overwhelmed her, and tears began to fall freely. For a long moment, she could not speak. When she finally did, her voice was barely a whisper. I am so sorry. For the first time, I believed her completely. Not from emotion, but because of her growth. It did not sound like damage control. It sounded like real understanding. There is a massive difference. Later, I stood up and walked to the shelf. The memory box was sitting there, waiting for us. The very box that started this entire journey. The one she once dismissed, which ultimately taught both of us a vital lesson about love. I carried it back and placed it right in front of her. My daughter stared at the box, almost too afraid to touch it. "Mom," she whispered. I smiled and said, "Take it. This is still the most valuable inheritance I am leaving you." Her face filled with gratitude, everything at once. The old letters, the pictures, all of it. I gently touched the wooden lid. Everything inside this box represents a lifetime of loving you. We sat in silence for a few seconds before I spoke the final truth. "My will is not my legacy." She looked up. "The money is not my legacy. The house is not either." I placed my hand over hers. "You are." That was when she finally broke. Not loud or dramatic, but quietly. The way we break when we realize what almost slipped away. We sat together for a very long time, talking, remembering, and beginning to heal. Healing does not happen overnight. It demands time, patience, and real consistency. For the first time in years, we were moving in the right direction. Watching the afternoon sun glint off the lake, I realized something major. The greatest legacy I could leave her was not money or property. It was not even forgiveness. It was the chance to grow into someone better. And finally, she was ready. If this journey taught me anything, it is that deep love and pure entitlement can often wear the same face. As parents, we spend decades sacrificing. We work long hours, shelve our own dreams, and carry heavy burdens our kids may never truly understand. We do it gladly because true love does not keep score. But there is a massive line between giving and completely surrendering yourself. There is a world of difference between supporting your child and raising them to view your sacrifices as guaranteed obligations. For years, I thought loving my daughter meant saying yes to everything, shielding her from failure, and always putting her desires above my own. What I finally realized is that healthy love requires firm boundaries, and those boundaries are never punishments. They are acts of pure self-respect, which every human deserves, regardless of their age. I also learned that gratitude matters far more than any inheritance. Money is spent, property is sold, and assets vanish. But genuine gratitude shapes our character forever. A grateful heart values people over things. An entitled heart does the opposite. Our greatest legacy is never found in a bank account or legal papers. It lives in the souls we touch, the kindness we share, and the values we leave behind for those we love. I learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means releasing your bitterness while still honoring the painful lessons you went through. You can forgive someone and still hold your boundaries. You can love them deeply while expecting them to do better. Most of all, I learned that it is never too late to grow, not for parents, children, or families. Sometimes, painful conversations spark the deepest healing. And the things we value least often become our most precious treasures. If this story touched you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt taken for granted by someone you loved? or realized you were pouring your energy into the wrong things. Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If these emotional family stories and life lessons touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Your support helps me keep sharing these moments with those who need them most. Before you leave, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Reading your comments and connecting with you across the miles means everything to me. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with me. And remember, the most precious legacy we leave behind isn't something we can ever own.